Welcome to the Silicon Slopes Conversations. We're here with Raj Ramanan, who's the COO of Scorpion. Cool title, cool name.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks everyone for coming. As you know, there will be Q&A in the end. All right, tell us a little bit about Scorpion first, for those that don't know. Recently, there was a lot of billboards, and you guys came in kind of like a lightning bolt. So tell us about the company, though.
Yeah, absolutely. We came in pretty hot to Utah and definitely adopted the billboard culture, thanks to Andrea, I think, who's out there. So Scorpion, let me put it this way. If you describe Apple as a consumer hardware company, Tesla as a car company, what Scorpion does is we're a local digital marketing company. Through software and through humans, we help local services, small and medium-sized businesses, grow their business with our websites, SEO, lead management, reputation management, marketing, et cetera, or email marketing, et cetera. But I think our more aspirational vision, right? If Apple makes beautiful consumer tech to enable you to think different, or Tesla is trying to get us to energy independence, I think our mission is really about empowering the entrepreneur and the business owner. And I think the pandemic taught us how important small businesses are to society, to our communities. And so really kind of fueling that, in some ways fueling the American dream is kind of why we get out of bed every night.
Gotcha. And software and humans, that's cool.
Yeah.
You usually need both, right?
Mm-hmm.
I get asked a lot from folks, and it sometimes tech, sometimes software, sometimes just Main Street, USA. I want to start a business. How do I do it? There's billions of resources, right? And but when you're actually asked the question, you're like, ooh, well, I have a checklist and all of these resources, so it's putting them to assets that exist already. But it's always like, get ready for a lot of stuff, and as soon as you can, find somebody else to do it for you, right?
Yep.
That's good at it, which is what you guys help.
Exactly.
Okay, very cool. And customers, by and large, are SMBs,
Yeah,
various sizes, demographics.
So we have 14,000 customers. And I think one thing that makes Scorpion pretty unique as opposed to other tech players and even agencies in this space is that very early on, Scorpion verticalized. So we're in legal, home services, medical, and franchises. Always SMB, but along those verticals. And our growth map has us, sort of conquesting other verticals.
Okay. And what are, as a case study or an example, what are some of your favorite examples of how you guys are helping SMBs? Is it like a bakery because you like donuts, or is it like an auto shop because you like fixing your car? How does it work? Give us a couple of examples.
No, those are totally fair questions. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Scorpion started with personal injury lawyers. And so there are examples where in competitive markets like LA, the way they grow is they want their name everywhere. TV, billboard, you guys have all seen this, right? Including online, so that, God forbid, something horrible happens, you have recall. You want them to rank really highly. And so what we do is create an absolutely beautiful website, landing pages that feed leads into it, 20 years of experience plus machine learning algorithms so that the sites are completely SEO optimized. Add on to it sort of email campaigns, et cetera, but also have a dedicated account manager, which again is kind of expensive, but a big part of our model. So this high-end lawyer, and this is true for all 14,000 customers, has a dedicated person to talk about strategy. So in the pandemic, people were driving less, traffic accidents went down, a good thing. How do we modify their marketing to still keep up their lead volume? How do we change allocation between paid advertising and SEO? The machine sort of informs what to do, but it's the human that's almost like a virtual CMO working with these people to protect their business. And we have examples. So in our LA office, we have a wall of letters, and literally home services clients that you saved my business. You put my daughter through college. You allowed us to buy another truck and expand. And that is so part of the Scorpion culture to tie what we do to these customer outcomes. So those are some examples.
Yeah. And so it could start with, I want my company to make more money, right?
Absolutely.
And that could be your first, customer that you guys onboard. But it sounds like after the fact, there's strategic vision from the goal or the OKR of the client, and then you guys help consult them, and then obviously you've got your toolbox of products.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it, right? So in local, and maybe a lot of you know this, the average customer retention is 50%. So I had a startup in local, I ran a local agency, I worked at 2 local media companies. North of 50% is considered good. Scorpion's retention is routinely above 90%. We're at 94% right now, which is a testament to these really long relationships. So yeah, initially you come to us, I want a pretty website, I want more leads, but we become this sort of like trusted advisor that through the low points, and we've even done things where we've recommended reducing spend with us. Like, hey, you guys are full, and this is not the best use of your money right now. So we have these sort of long-term trusted relationships. Our CEO, Rustin, goes by Rue. He still personally manages seven or 9 clients that started with him. So it's sort of like customer intimacy is really part of the DNA. I think that's a big part of what we do.
Yeah, and it keeps you sharp. And obviously, you're kind of eating your own dog food.
Yeah, that's a big part of exactly right.
So as the CEO of Scorpion, I imagine every business that you walk into or interact with just in your personal life, you would look around and be like, yeah, you guys need some help, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So like my best friend growing up is a pediatric allergist, and he is with a company that's sort of part of a franchise. And so I pitched him. In my first 2 weeks on the job, and we're talking to the leadership of that company. So yeah, I really believe in what we do. So anyone in my personal network, it's kind of a pleasure to talk to them about Scorpion.
Gotcha. All right. And then what do you guys do to get customers? What are some of the kind of cool tricks and methods and processes that you guys use?
So this is really cool. It's really interesting. So Scorpion is 21 years old. Rustin, or Rue, and his brother started at their kitchen table building websites for small businesses in like 2001 or something like that. And it grew and grew and grew organically. This little hidden gem company north of LA into a multi-$100-million business. We took funding for the first time 2 years ago. No outside funding, profitable every year, double-digit growth every year. But what's crazy is all of that growth came with something like 20 or 30 sellers and very low investment in marketing. So a lot of it was our retention is so high, our sellers are very, very good, deeply understand digital marketing and our client needs. And we didn't have to sort of sing our praises. So a lot of the reason we took the money and a lot of people that knew people like me came on board is to take this unbelievable machine and start telling our story, build that sales engine, because we think we can just sort of turbocharge growth.
Yeah. And I guess that's the cheapest and easiest way is retention and probably good word of mouth referrals, right?
100%. And so much of the growth of the first 18 years came from that.
Very cool. Yeah, you don't need a complicated dashboard to show that
Exactly.
That works out very well. All right, so let's talk a little bit about culture, and we're going to jump into like the role of COO, which I'm looking forward to.
Sure.
We've had
Maybe
a few
you can explain
COOs.
it to me.
Oh yeah, I will. But you guys have gotten awards and recognition as a great place to work. As the COO, that's an area of your focus, but what are some of the reasons why you guys have those accolades?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I've been at Scorpion for about a year. I met the company 4 years ago, so I'd love to take credit for this, but the credit goes to Rue, the executive team, and all of the long-tenured Scorpions that really built this place. And so there's a few ways to answer culture, right? There's a very sort of clinical or consulting answer about employee value prop and talking about benefits and things like that. But like I choose to answer this in terms of like what makes Scorpion really special. And when I interviewed Eric Ruveni, who leads our home services vertical, he interviewed me, and he said a key Scorpion value is to care. I mean, he used a swear word, but for here, to care, and to care deeply about your customer, to care deeply about your colleague, and to care deeply about your craft. And with respect to culture, that is such a part of Scorpion's DNA, as just one of many, many examples. So I mentioned that the client example and the wall of letters, those get shared around all the time and legitimately celebrated. There's also like a gifting culture. So in the last year of my life, I started a new job. We had our second child. We moved to Utah, we bought a house, I had a birthday, we had the holidays, and I celebrated my 1-year anniversary. For each occasion, Scorpion, the company, and the people I worked with marked it in some way. They gave me a gift, and these aren't like cheesy corporate gifts. These are incredibly thoughtful, like, how did you know this about me? I think 6 weeks in, we had our second child. My wife picked a theme for the second child of bears or something like that. Somehow bear onesies and bear themed things. I'm like, how do you know this about me? So you just feel like you're part of something bigger. You feel really taken care of, which is huge. And you marry that with everyone sees this deep client impact, which is incredibly motivating. And then equity. And something that Rustin did, which I think is exemplary, is he gave every single employee equity, ultimately out of his own pocket. And so there's also this sense of ownership. Those things are incredibly powerful ingredients to a culture. I really view my job as taking that and then scaling it, right? We're now in this remote environment. We're now across three core offices. I think 1,051 Scorpions work here. So how do you take that same magic, that same culture, which grew 20 years ago from people working together in tiny offices and partying together, and scale it across all of these new people? And those are some of the challenges that we're working through. But the raw materials, honestly, I feel are magic.
Yeah, the platform and the base is there. And I guess your HR department used to work for the CIA, allegedly.
That's right.
No, that's a tall task for whoever's kind of giving those thoughtful gifts.
Yeah,
Kudos to them.
no kidding. And it's not just like one department, it's everybody, because people care that much to get to know their peers and their colleagues and things like that. And it's rubbed off on me. Like, I think I've legitimately become a bigger gift giver. Mandy, if you're watching at home, I hope you agree. Or even like a thing Rue does is he just loves to make someone's day. So we had a happy hour here in Salt Lake City after an offsite, and he gave like a massive tip to like the person taking care of us, and she was in tears. And this idea of just like making someone's day, I think bleeds into how we treat each other and bleeds into how we treat our customers. Just the above and beyond is so part of the DNA and starts from the top that it's a really inspiring environment.
Yeah, and it probably produces a lot of happy feelings and endorphins that make people more productive. And
yeah. Well, I don't want this to turn into a commercial for Scorpion.
Yeah.
So it's not perfect, right? Like as part of scaling, it's grown so quickly and so sort of organically with like hiring friends of friends and things like that. A lot of what I'm putting my shoulder against, and with a lot of people in this room, is scaling and putting in processes, right? Like performance management, making sure we're giving rewards the right way, more consistent bonus programs, more transparency around financials, more diversity in our hiring and things like that. But again, I think those are things that you can bring in from the outside. The raw material culture, the magic is already here. And so I really view my job as scaling that.
Gotcha. And so you mentioned you moved here about a year ago, and then a lot of Scorpions moved here recently. Why was that?
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting story. Scorpion was founded in Valencia, which is a city just north of LA. That's where Rue grew up and where a lot of the initial team was based. We still have an office there. It's our biggest office. It's beautiful. When we took private equity money, we were very intentional about where we wanted to move the headquarters. There were reasons to get out of California that all of you understand or are familiar with. There was also reasons to get out of Valencia, just to have access to a broader talent pool. So we actually did a very scientific site selection, right? Like where between our investors and our executive team, just some examples like Raleigh, Durham, Austin, Dallas, Denver, Boulder, Boise, obviously LA, the Bay Area, and just started just ruling things out based on criteria. And no exaggeration, Salt Lake City won hands down. And the primary reasons are attractive business climate, access to unbelievable talent. If you think, I explained the history of Scorpion, great platform, but what we're really missing is that sales and marketing engine. And the sort of SaaS culture here is, as all of you know, is unbelievable. And so that was a key part of the bet. And then lifestyle factors, like cost of living, which I know is going up here, but compared to Austin or the coast, it's still a relative deal. And then quality of life, like it's absolutely beautiful here. So one, great decision. It's a bet that's paid off. A lot of folks in the room, we've met some incredible people. Jake Rennie, Ryan Jump, Sarah Tippett, some of our most productive sellers, Aaron Doucette, are out here. So the bet is paying off. And then personally, I have no ties to Utah. So when this opportunity came up, I knew I wanted to work here. But Mandy and I sat across the table and she's like, so Utah, huh? And she's a doctor. She'd just gotten licensed in Texas. We kind of rolled the dice. I'd visited once. She had never visited, so super skeptical. But honestly, we love it. We live in Olympus Cove. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. We have neighbors with kids the same age. The public works here are unbelievable. The parks are beautiful. People are so friendly. We've made some good friends here. She got a great job at Intermountain, so we're very happy, and you never know, but we really hope this is a long-term home for us.
Yeah, that's great. And so I'd imagine most of the folks in this new office are a mix from transplants and organic here.
Yeah, so a surprising amount of people wanted to move, like for the same reasons we did, right? The quality of life and things like that. So we have a healthy number of transplants and then a nice pipeline of local talent.
Very cool. All right, let's jump into what is a COO. This would be fun if it was an exercise like quick. The CEO doesn't get to go do cool things because they're back like getting stuff done.
Yeah.
Oftentimes is the next in line. Kind of sits on the board sometimes as well, but the worker bee maybe. But what is the COO in a tech company doing?
It's a really, really good question. And so the answer, unfortunately, is that it depends. So Angela on my team, who runs our personal injury vertical, sent me this article towards the end of last year. It's an HBR article called like the most misunderstood position, the COO. And it sort of laid out 7 archetypes. Some of the ones you mentioned, like the CEO might come up with the vision, but you're the one that executes it, or you're their thought partner, or you're the next in line, et cetera. But the most important ingredient is the relationship with the CEO. That is sort of your primary job, is to sort of pivot around the CEO, make sure you're in a high trust, low ego relationship, and sort of compensate for their needs and sort of counterbalance their strengths. So with Rue, who is this like, and I say this, how can I say this? Not just to sort of brag about him, but I've been very lucky to work with a lot of amazing people. I mean, truly someone who deeply, deeply understands customer needs, built this business from the ground up, understands every role and function, is probably outworking almost everybody on the team, and just cares so deeply about the nuts and bolts of this business. What he's really good at is sort of product, vision, culture. And the things where I think I can help are sort of team management, metrics, execution, board management, things like that. So just my background, between consulting and private equity and sort of tech, I think it's a nice counterbalance.
Gotcha. And the CEO community, whether it's formal, unstructured, they talk a lot to each other. Does that exist in the COO community as well?
So I haven't really mined it in Utah, but when I took this job, and certainly when I've been evaluating things over the last year, like metrics and workflow, through my network and really through friends of friends, I've started talking to a number of COOs. And I think that article I mentioned is spot on. There is no archetype other than those themes of like super tight relationship with the CEO, having a very clear mandate that sort of balances strengths. And then more tactically, ideas of how to structure teams and things like that. But, examples of things I'm doing is like help manage the exec team and my team through OKRs, really dial in metrics with the help of some great team members, and just add a lot of transparency. This is where we're going. Rue sets the vision. This is the plan to get there. This is how we're doing against plan, and then course correct. So probably more of that sort of execution box as we were talking about.
Okay. And then if you're to measure the bottom line of, the CEO could be the company or the stock price, the CFO didn't run out of money, or you're managing cash flow well. Your interaction with the CFO, if you're running an efficient operation, what does that look like?
So, luckily, we have a really, really tight team. So I think our CFO, Sheppy, comrade in arms. So it's almost like my job, and again, not me, sort of representing 600 ops people and really all 1,000 people, is to deliver certain operational metrics. To me, Shep sort of owns the financial scorecard. Did it work? Did the bets you paid off, did those drivers lead to the financial outcome that we committed to Rue and to our investors? And then help me course correct, so whether that's driving metrics or tying metrics to financial outcomes, and then make sure we don't run out of money. Pull the alarm if we're misallocating capital.
Yeah. And so for CEOs, a lot of the time, we're doing fine, but if we want to grow and scale according to the goals of the board and the executives, it would be cool if we had like 1 or 2 more pieces of machinery or software. Is the CEO kind of at the forefront of like, we got to spend a little bit more money to make more money and improve efficiencies? How does that work?
No, it's a really good question there as well. Ultimately, I think it's kind of cool that like I sit at the nexus of Yes, I want these things, but I also understand the trade-off. So to me, it's like I almost own the ROI. I almost own the justification of that if we want to make this bet, we need to bet on this financial outcome. And if that does not happen, that's on me. So that's kind of how I view my role. And again, not in a vacuum. Ultimately, Rue needs to underwrite any big bet.
Yeah. But, like if there's efficiencies that you see with your counterparts or competitors or something, and it's just a simple tool or application,
yeah, that's
you're
me.
kind of the champion. And
100%. I mean, really, another way to think about it, and I hope this isn't cliched, is that Rue kind of sets the 5 and 3 year vision, and my job is sort of deliver it a year, 2 years at a time, and then my team a quarter at a time. That's kind of a way to think about it. And yeah, if there are ways to drive efficiency over and above plan, I have to identify and capture those.
Gotcha. And what, whether it's using OKRs or some other method, as a COO, what are some of the hardest efficiencies to track and monitor and see? And what are some of the easiest ones as far as like, oh, this is working clearly?
Yep. So I like this question because one, again, ex-consultant, ex-private equity person, metrics are near and dear to my heart. Colson is out there. He's my guy, my comrade in arms in terms of developing a lot of our metrics cadence. And I mentioned Scorpion kind of, was this hidden company that grew out of nowhere. A lot of what they did was sort of do this on intuition. And so, yeah, there were some metrics, but it wasn't necessarily articulated and pulled together. So we've spent a ton of effort pulling data from different sources to sort of show what are the key drivers in the ops world, launching new customers, retention, upselling, and then productivity, translating that into a weekly scorecard for each of the teams, tracking progress against that, and then immediately diagnosing issues to go fix it. And so I'd say that was one of probably the biggest wins we had last year, and something that I attribute to some of our scale metrics. Like our cost to serve as a percentage of revenue has come down 4 points. Our retention has gone up, I think almost 10 percentage points, which is huge from the bottom of the pandemic to where we are today. And again, I take very little of the credit. It's the team doing the work. But a lot of these sort of OKRs and metrics cadence, I think, underpin that and showed us the drivers that led to these improvements.
Yeah. And so for companies that are maybe Series A, Series B, because you've got a lot of experience with big, small, and medium, including all of the customers of Scorpion, when is a good time to bring on a COO? And what would be a good strategy in landing one if you're the CEO and you clearly know you need help?
So again, I think so much of it depends on the personality and strengths of the CEO. So let's say it's a founder who took a company Series A, Series B. I think around B or C, a team size greater than 100, I would consider it if the CEO is product leaning, right? If the CEO is deeply, deeply product leaning, that is an all-consuming job with its own sort of agile sprint cadence that requires deep work. I think Paul Graham had the article Makers versus Managers, right? So makers need big chunks of time to do deep flow state work. Managers think in like half an hour calendar blocks. And it's really hard to context switch there. So I think it depends on the strengths of the CEO. If like she or he is operational versus product. It depends on stage and team size. So there's a clear division of labor. Let's say both things are true, then yes, you want certain hard skills. You want complementary skills. But I cannot emphasize enough, really, really screen for relationship and personality fit. Like Rue and I had a 4-year courtship. I was at Nexstar, which is a broadcasting company. They're the largest owner of TV stations. They owned a digital agency that they brought me in to turn around, which I did, made it profitable, grew it. Then I helped them look for other digital assets to buy, surveyed a couple thousand small businesses. That's where I first heard about Scorpion, contacted them, did diligence, et cetera. Ultimately, that deal fell through, partially because Rue wanted to give equity to everybody, and Nexstar didn't want to do that. So deal falls through. I quit Nexstar, because I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. I don't want to be a part of this. Then just kept in touch with them. I did a transformation role at Hearst, but flew out to go see them. And so I think it's going to be a long process for me to get here.
Yeah. And so if you've got aspirations like you enjoy operations, what are some things in this modern world that you need to be good at to be a COO, and what are some things that, if that's what you want, you should be studying or practicing or doing?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think I think it comes down to like what you like to do, right? And so I've never been a 0 to 1 person, and that's hard for me to admit, but I've always worked really well with entrepreneurs. I did a startup, I think right when I turned 30, and my friend, my business partner, he was the visionary. He's the one that wrote the business plan and did the product. But I'm really good at 1 to 10, right? I'm really good at taking something and making it work a lot better. And so it's just finding opportunities for that. So I think I took a really long and winding path that I don't necessarily recommend to anyone, but I do think the experience at McKinsey was foundational because I just got to see a lot of businesses. And then I worked at KKR, which I think took years off my life, but I got to turn around businesses. So really understanding levers. And a lot of my early experiences in manufacturing, which like, how did I end up here? But so much of software, if you think of like lean agile, comes from manufacturing practices. So it's kind of like that Steve Jobs speech, right? The dots only make sense when you're looking backwards. I might have butchered that, but I could never have predicted it would have led me here, but it kind of makes sense looking backwards. So I think it's diversity of experience, figure out what you're really good at. The other thing too is like, I have a real passion for working with people, finding sort of untapped potential, structuring teams, incentive design, and that's always been true, even from my early work at McKinsey. So it's kind of, the dots were kind of all pointing here. But if someone's interested in doing this, I would say, find ways to like have a diversity of experience. No matter what your job is, take risk, like make on the business contributions, especially project type work. Like you see a process that's not working, how do you make it better? That's a way to get cycles. I also think, and I would recommend this to my kids, that everyone should try their hand at starting something or joining something early stage. Because like, I never went to business school, but I think like I could have taken a seminar in negotiations, or I could have sat across from someone selling my company, and I did that. And there's nothing more visceral or personal. Nothing is a learning opportunity like that. So I think those are sort of the steps in sort of increasing order of risk that I would suggest to kind of build to this skill set.
Yeah. And so one more thing that I associate with operator, in this example, COO. So, like Navy SEALs or Green Berets, they're called operators, right? And for them, it doesn't matter if they want to do it or not. They go do it, and that's the definition of their role and title, operator. And so for a COO, there might be instances where they're like, oh, that's the vision, that's the roadmap. Fine, I'll do it. What are your thoughts on that? Like, if you're like half in, half out on that vision, it might be over in like 6 months or something. How does that impact like the role of a COO?
No, that's an interesting question. I think one, like for me personally, I can't fake it, right? So I need to be bought into the big vision, the big why are we here? If I'm not, I'm just going to leave. I'll figure something else to do. And luckily here, I violently am. I've spent 13 or 14 years in local, between startup, local media, agency. This is the best thing I've ever seen in local. So I feel very lucky to be here, to be at Scorpion. But I do think it's really important to sort of identify that.
But you'll speak up, and you might not be the visionary on paper or on the org chart, but like, no.
Yeah. So I mean, let's say the 5-year vision, the 10-year vision, I'm violently aligned with. Let's say Rue or the exec team comes up with something that I don't agree with, maybe an acquisition or something, in a year, 2-year time frame. We have a very close management team where I feel completely empowered to raise my hand and say no. But there are situations where you have to disagree and commit. And I think so long it doesn't violate the big vision, it doesn't violate my ethics, disagree, commit, buy in, move forward.
Gotcha. All right, very cool. I think we've got a better idea of what a COO is.
Hopefully, yeah.
That was great. Let's open it up to questions in the audience. I believe we have a roaming microphone. We will in 1 second, so get the questions ready. It's always tricky for the first one.
Fire away, I can take it.
I'm always intrigued as to the name of a company. Why Scorpion?
So the story might be apocryphal, but I think, Andrea, keep me honest here, I think Rustin, the founder, is a Scorpio, and I think he might have a tattoo or something like that. And so really, that's the genesis of it. And what's interesting is like, the name is Scorpion. Like it's I don't know, it has certain connotations, but like the culture is like so warm and so fuzzy and things like that. So that's really the story of the name. Good question.
How do you approach if a vision comes to you and you feel like it's the core of what the company could be doing, how do you approach the CEO with that? When typically it's, the vision's trickling down. Like, have you had that experience yet?
Yeah. Again, what's really cool about Rue and what's really cool about this executive team, like it's not that formal, right? It's like, I think 6 or 7 of us on the executive team, all kind of like similar age, and Rue never pulls rank, or I don't think I've ever seen him pull rank. So the vision and like what we're doing over the next 5 or 10 years and how that translates to annual plan, we built it together. Like we were in offsites too many, and sessions and late night dinners and whiteboarding and PowerPoint decks to kind of lay this out, and it was incredibly collegial. So I think it speaks to him as a leader, and it sort of speaks to our culture that like I feel tremendous voice and skin in the game as opposed to something being mandated to me. Now, there are certain things that he sees, let's say certain product bets that I'm not always able to connect the dots with like outside an analysis. Like he has a hunch, but that hunch led from 0 to however hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. Like part of why I'm here is because he has this X factor, right? This ability, and not just him, the entire product team, and to some extent all the people that had a hand in building Scorpion, they deeply understand this. So there's also an element of trust.
So on your website, you have law firms, home services, dentists, franchises, multi-location brands, things like that. Where are you going next? And what about technology companies?
So we spent a lot of time talking about this. So just in the verticals you mentioned, we think we can grow the company by 4x. It's actually research I did when I did diligence on this. So there's plenty of white space, particularly in home services, but really across all of those verticals. If you look at sort of like, I think it's like a Bain framework, like profit from the core, or sort of land and expand. The next step would be to go to analogous verticals. So other local services business that have similar dynamics. Think about like vets, chiropractors, sort of other local service providers, right? Beyond that, and this is further down the roadmap, are retail categories, things like restaurants, accountants, professional services, and things like that. A lot of our sort of technology and business model is based around local, right? We deeply understand location times vertical, sub-vertical, and all the optimizations that come with that. If you think about like keyword strategy and things like that. So to do sort of a mass e-commerce strategy, could the algorithms be trained that way theoretically? But there are, tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars from where we are today to that before we grow there. But like things could change. That's my best guess as of right now.
So you talked about you have account manager per customer. So obviously they have one too many.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit more about how do you manage this? Because you have 15,000 customers, right?
Yeah.
How do you manage that?
It's hard. This is a big part of my job. So again, we're verticalized, and we're really lucky that we have very, very strong leaders and VPs and sort of a structure that then manages account managers. I think the average tenure of our account managers is also pretty long. These are some of the most impressive people I've worked with, and I want to get to know them more, that care deeply about their customer, and in a lot of cases have been with them for a long time. So how we do it is talent. So we hire incredibly smart people and promote the right people. Training. So there's a whole system of how to interact with a client, best practices, management, really strong directors and VPs that coach them through challenging situations, and increasingly technology. So can we automate the non-value add interaction? So one example is reporting, right? So every month or every couple weeks or every quarter, you want to know, how did my digital advertising do? Should I spend more? In my old world, that's an Excel file and an hour-long conversation. What we've done and are doing to improve are automated reporting that's highly visual, very easy to digest. You think of like plumbers who are out on jobs. They're not sitting in front of their computers. So mobile-friendly, sort of bite-sized content that I don't need to interact with my account manager. And increasingly, there's probably decisions you can make through mobile, whether that's increasing budget, changing tactics, texting with your MM. All of that increases our productivity.
So let's say you've made all the money you're going to make, and you're ready to retire, and you want to start a nonprofit. What would you do for your nonprofit?
I love this question. I've thought about this a lot for two reasons. My mom is involved with a charity that is building schools in India, and then my sister has done nonprofits for disadvantaged minorities getting to college in California. So, okay, there's gonna be a little bit of a dorky answer, but I read a lot about ethical altruism, like the Peter Singer work, The Most Good You Can Do. And so an argument, if you want to believe this, is that, we're so lucky, I'm so lucky living in America, making a good salary. If I donate that to high impact charities like GiveWell, you could just have this compounding impact. Like mosquito nets that could prevent malaria are $10 a piece. There are like children in Africa and India that get blind, and that like $100 vaccine could reverse that. So I don't know if I would start my own nonprofit, but we already do, but we'd like to give an increasing fraction to these sort of high impact charities. GiveWell is the example. So they're like a meta charity that then allocates your investment to other high impact causes like mosquito nets and that sort of thing. That's sort of what we believe in. I will say too, that's my belief. My wife, her father is a professor, and so two causes there, sort of childhood education, sort of big in my family as well, because my parents immigrated from India, and only because my dad was able to go to school. And then for her, the arts are super important. She's a doctor, but she grew up in like theater, and so any sort of support of the arts would also be something.
Cool. Last question for me. Do you have a favorite CEO-COO tandem?
So tough, because I think of a lot of models that didn't work, right? Like the famous one at Dell. I think the closest would be Facebook, right? Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg. I had a friend that was pretty early at Facebook, so I have a little bit of inside knowledge. But what I like is that Zuckerberg's a CEO, and it's really, really clear where he wants to focus on, right? Product and all of that. It's really clear what he doesn't want to focus on, which is like monetization and public perception and things like that. And she's so good at just sort of working around him and picking up those pieces in this incredibly collaborative and high trust arrangement that certainly hasn't hurt her career or anything like that. So to me, that seems like a really nice pairing. I mean, they've worked together for, my guess is approaching 10 years. This really nice partnership of clear roles and responsibilities, clear strengths and weaknesses, clear division of labor. That's something I aspire to. Not necessarily the same division, but I do think it's a good model.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you so much, Raj. Appreciate it.
Likewise.
Appreciate you being here, and congrats on all the success. It's
Thank
great.
you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.